Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Sarah Sundar, and I'm one of the research associates on the higher ed team. And together with our whole team, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our annual Higher Ed Alliance meeting. As you all know, we typically host this meeting during the annual NCWIT Summit, and I know all of us were really looking forward to doing that this year in San Diego. I know it's disappointing to not get to see each other in person, but of course, what matters more than where we're meeting is why we're meeting. And I think we can all agree that now more than ever, being in community, sharing in this BPC work is definitely the most important thing that we could be doing. You'll see that we've chosen to host this session as not a Zoom webinar, but as a Zoom meeting. So you can interact with each other, see each other. I know it's not quite the same as getting together in San Diego, sharing a scoop of salt and straw ice cream together, but we hope that you'll be in community this way. And as you're coming in, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your institution, and if you have a favorite memory of a past NCWIT summit, I know that I'd personally love to hear that, so feel free to include that in the chat as well. Our session today is divided into two parts. We'll kick off our first hour with a talk titled Coding the Quantum Future, How Quantum Technology Will Revolutionize Computer Science and Workforce Development. We'll then take a short 5-minute break at the top of the hour before we return to share some updates about upcoming NCWIT programs and opportunities. And we'll end with some time in breakout rooms to give you a chance to connect with one another. Our guest speaker today is Corbin Tillman-Dick, the founder and CEO of Maybell Quantum, a venture-backed quantum infrastructure company based in Denver. With a background in mechanical engineering and economics, Corbin previously led Boston Consulting Group's quantum computing efforts before founding Maybell. He is passionate about advancing quantum technologies and promoting diversity in the field. And on a personal note, I'll share that Lucy Sanders actually invited Corbin to speak at one of our internal NCWIT meetings last year. And it was such an impactful presentation, and we've been really looking forward to being able to bring this to the broader NCWIT higher ed community. So I'm delighted that we're able to finally do that today. Corbin, thank you so much for being here.
Sorry, thank you so much for that introduction, and I'm very excited and honored to be here, and excited to share a little bit about what quantum is, why it matters, and why it makes sense for NCWIT, and with your focus on promoting inclusion in uh, technological workforce development, to start thinking about quantum in a deliberate way as we move into the quantum future. So I have some slides, and I'm going to walk through them. But as I do, if folks have questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat, and then we'll have time at the end as well to answer questions, to interact on it. I want to make sure that the pieces that matter to all of you on the call are the pieces we talk about most. But it feels like overwhelmingly building a foundation. Give me just a second. Sorry, I'm in an active lab right now. Building a foundation on what we're talking about when we're talking about quantum is almost always a good use of time. And that's because quantum technologies are poised to be as important to the next century of technological development as the integrated circuit was to the last century. At this point, there is nothing that we've done on purpose as humans more than building transistors. We've at this point, built more transistors than we've taken breaths as a species. And every aspect of modern technology is driven by our control of these very basic on-off switches. And right now, we're about to enter a world over the next handful of years where quantum technologies become, as defining to what it means to be a person as the technology around transistors have been. And when you look at it, the first thing that's really important to understand in quantum is that quantum isn't just a different way to use a computer. It's a reinvention of what a computer is. The entire universe, as far as we know, is made up of or is governed by two separate sets of laws. And the first set we're all really familiar with. These are the laws of classical mechanics, and everything from, throw a ball up and the ball comes back down through to special relativity, all of that is classical mechanics. But when you have systems that are extraordinarily small or extraordinarily cold or a few other edge cases in physics, the laws of classical mechanics no longer work to describe those systems, and the laws of quantum mechanics take over. And it's important to recognize that these laws are as predictive, as powerful, as relevant as the laws of classical mechanics. It's just we, up until recently, have been much less able to directly control or manipulate them. But spurred both by a natural technological evolution and by a desperate need for better control of these systems, we're beginning to cross that threshold. And why that matters right now is because technological progress since the invention of the first transistor has been governed by something that I'm guessing most everyone on this call is familiar with, which is Moore's law, the idea that transistor density doubles every 2 years. And that has held up well until relatively recently. However, today, a gate in a transistor is only about 10 atoms across. And you can't double density from 10 atoms very many times before you're splitting atoms, which physicist colleagues have informed me is a bad idea to do inside your phone. And so we need a different way to scale our computers. Even more importantly, there are certain problems that no matter how much scaling we did with a classical computer, the classical computer will be unable to solve those problems. And the reason boils down to the two fundamental differences between a classical computer and a quantum computer. We've talked a little bit already about transistors. And at its core, every computer, if you strip it down to its bare bones, they're fundamentally identical. You have a whole bunch of microscopic wires that are either charged or not charged. And depending on their charge state, they are a 1 or a 0 in a binary system. And your processor in your classical computer looks at those ones and zeros, those yeses and nos, one at a time, one after another, really quickly. In a laptop, this will happen over 1 trillion times a second, but each transistor is examined as a discrete sequential event in your processor. Quantum computers are different in two really fundamental ways. The first is that those ones and zeros are gone. And they're replaced with what, my co-founder, in an early call with investors, we had one of them ask, what is a quantum bit? What's a qubit? And he said, yeah, it's actually pretty straightforward. A qubit is just any physical object that can maintain a stable quantum superposition of states and be interrogated, which, while accurate, is an entirely unhelpful answer, right? Unless you already have a PhD in physics, that doesn't actually get you that much closer to understanding what your qubit is. The way that I think about a qubit is that instead of being a 1 or a 0, it's a probability. And your qubit exists only as a probability until you look at it. And that piece, I think, gets covered pretty well in popular science literature about quantum computing. The second piece is as important and very rarely gets covered. And that's that qubits don't resolve one at a time, one after another. Instead, a whole array of qubits can be entangled into a single quantum object. And when that happens, from the perspective of the universe, these many qubits, although physically distinct, are only one thing. They're a perfectly correlated system. And when you examine them, if you're using the right entanglements and the right algorithms, the best answers will rise to the top and the worst ones will fall out the bottom. And they'll do that simultaneously. So instead of being examined one at a time, one after another, with no light speed delay, no separation in action, these qubits will give you the answer. Now, that second piece is unbelievably powerful because it means that with the classical computer, if you go from 1 to 20 bits, you've gone from 1 to 20 yes or no questions you can answer. But with a quantum processor, if you go from 1 to 20 qubits, you're going to 2 to the 20th power of computing power. So you go from 1 qubit of computing power to over 1 million qubits of computing power at your 20th qubit. And for certain types of problems, that unlocks things that are inherently impossible for classical computers. An example of that is molecular modeling. So if you were to try to do an accurate physics-based model of penicillin using a classical computer, you would need more transistors, more of those charged wires than there are atoms in the observable universe. And it's literally impossible. We will never be able to do that with a classical computer. But a quantum computer with only 286 qubits, so long as they're high quality qubits, can fully model penicillin. And at 287, it's not something a little bigger than penicillin. No, now it's penicillin interacting in an environment. And by the time you have a few thousand high quality qubits, you live in a world where you can go to the doctor's office, spit in a tube, and while you're sitting there waiting in the waiting room, they produce new medicine that cures everything wrong with you and has zero side effects. And that's the sort of world that quantum computers are getting ready to make possible for us today. So the way I like to think about it is, if transistors, which are the foundation of all modern technology, if those are fire, quantum's nuclear. And outside in, you can see why people would say, oh, these are kind of similar, right? They're both kind of orange and warm. But the actual technology at the core of this, its power, its capability, its risk, are fundamentally different and unlock entirely new things for us as a species. And among those new things, and I realize this probably isn't the core focus of those on this call, is the best analysis out there suggests that it's going to be worth about $3.5 trillion. And to put that in perspective annually, that's larger than the US healthcare industry. It's up there with finance in terms of the biggest industries out there. And it applies to almost every industry you can think of already. But most importantly, this $3.5 trillion number, these are the things that we can already look at them and say that quantum has an advantage here. And that's like somebody in the 1950s saying, this is what computers are good for. It's almost certainly an understatement of what this technology will do. So that's why I'm excited about quantum. That's why I left my job at BCG to found Maybell. And it really is an incredibly exciting industry to be at the foundation of. We're in the early days of this technology, but truly preparing to transform civilization as this technology scales and matures. And excitingly, Colorado is the best place in the world to do quantum today. And so what does global leadership look like? Well, if you go back to the year 2000, we have 4 Nobel Prize winners who have done work in quantum science here in Colorado and won their Nobel Prize since 2000. That is a wildly large number. By some ways of counting, it's about 40% of all the Nobel Prizes that relate to quantum since 2000 have been awarded here in Colorado. That then leads to more companies doing quantum and more organizations doing quantum than anywhere else in the world here in Colorado. The Quantum Economic Development Consortium is a now global convening body for quantum that was set up by the federal government in 2016. And if you go through and you count their members, there are more here in Colorado than anywhere else. And that's not a per capita number. There are more here than in California. There are more here than anywhere. That's pretty wild for a small state in the Mountain West. And that translates then to thousands of jobs already in quantum here in Colorado. And we'll get into what those jobs look like because they're different than what you might expect, but we'll come back to that later. Now, importantly, we are really proud in the Mountain West of the leadership we've shown in quantum to date, but we recognize that leadership today does not guarantee a sustainable advantage. If you go back to 1947 and the invention of the transistor, that didn't happen in Silicon Valley. That happened in Murray Hill, New Jersey. And for the first couple decades around the development of the transistor, that's where all of the papers and all the Nobel Prizes and all of the most important work was happening. It was Bell Labs and the surrounding community there in Murray Hill. And if you go to Murray Hill today to see the birthplace of the transistor, they have this beautiful commemorative water tower in the shape of a transistor to remind everyone that that's where the transistor came from. But what they don't have is tens of thousands of jobs and trillions of dollars in economic value that have come from that central invention. That happened in Silicon Valley. And if we look at this for Murray Hill, that's a sad story. But if we look at it for America, that's great news, right? It moved from one coast to the other, but ultimately the US is still the global powerhouse behind technology globally. In quantum, unless we make really smart choices about how we prepare our workforce, how we prepare our infrastructure, how we deploy our investment, it is not going to be a story of this started in Colorado and ended up in Silicon Valley or in, North Carolina or in Illinois. It's going to be a question of this started in Colorado and ended up in, Shan, like Shanghai or Hefei or something like that, right? And if you look at how nations are investing, that fear is founded. This is just the raw dollars. This is from a McKinsey report. And you can see that the US ranks fourth globally right now in terms of our government investment into quantum technologies. And that should worry all of us. But more important than this data is this second slide. And that's that China is not just investing more money, they're turning it into breakthroughs on the technologies that support quantum technology. And this page happens to focus on quantum cryogenics because that's a field that I'm closest to and that we were able to pull a comprehensive database of all of the papers in this topic. But I have close colleagues in the qubit space and the laser space and other areas in quantum. They say you could make a chart exactly like this for almost any aspect of quantum technology, where for decades, China wasn't investing in this space. In 2016, they had their 13th five-year plan, and they said they are going to pass the United States in the bend on quantum technology and become the world leader from infrastructure to applications. And now we're seeing that show up. And yes, people can say, a lot of these Chinese papers are derivative. Okay, that's true. A lot of them are, but my team reads every single one of these papers, and solidly 20% of them are pretty good. They're papers that justify us taking a step back and saying the Chinese are doing phenomenal research on this topic that is world leading. And we need to make sure that we do what we can to prepare United States researchers, workers, the economy to not get passed in the bend on quantum technology. And the good news is the federal government does care about this, right? In part because of Colorado's leadership in quantum technology, but also in part because of a plan we put together and a consortium we put together. The federal government, under the CHIPS Act and the EDA Tech Hub program within the CHIPS Act, chose a nonprofit organization that Lucy Sanders and I are both key leaders in as America's Quantum Tech Hub, and led a Series A that included money from the private sector, included money from the federal government, and included money from the state governments in Colorado, New Mexico, and Wyoming to secure generational leadership in quantum technologies through our early leadership here in the Mountain West. So a little bit about Elevate Quantum. This is the only major place-based investment by the federal government into quantum. There are a lot of states doing good things in quantum right now. So I don't mean to downplay those. South Carolina, Massachusetts, Maryland, Illinois, Montana, that's most of the list, all doing really credible things right now to push quantum forward. But the federal government has picked one hub, and it's here in the Mountain West. And the biggest reason for that is these two data points right here. We were able to pull together a 130-member coalition that includes quantum-focused companies, it includes universities, it includes workforce development organizations, it includes NCWIT and a lot of other peer organizations to you. And 90% of those organizations are local to the Mountain West. We didn't need to create an artificial consortium across the whole country. No, we had a whole bunch of folks who were already working together, building things together, and were able to formalize that agreement into a plan to secure generational leadership in quantum here in the Mountain West. And the 10% that aren't local, There are companies like Microsoft, IBM, NVIDIA, Amazon, Google, the most important technology companies in the world who are partnering with us because this is where quantum is happening. And all of us across this consortium have a shared vision, which is accelerating the commercialization of quantum technology. That's the purpose of Elevate Quantum, and we're doing that by investing in 4 key pillars. The first is about making it easier to build quantum stuff. We'll get into what Maybell builds in a few minutes, but if you're trying to build a quantum computer, the first thing you have to do is spend a lot of money on infrastructure and creating an open access commercial user facility where folks can get in and get access to these really exquisite systems that allow you to create, maintain, and manipulate quantum states. That's a key piece of what Elevate Quantum is doing, along with fabrication capabilities that are right-sized for the quantum industry today. The second piece is making sure that startups can launch successfully here so that they can go from an idea that's being researched in a lab to a company that has a credible path to deploying that. And then that companies like mine and the other 50 odd companies here in Colorado and New Mexico working on quantum, that we can scale up successfully. And we have a first in the nation loan guarantee program designed to support quantum scale ups who are a little bit past the accelerator or venture studio stage, but still need capital and cross-cutting support to go from selling a handful of systems to becoming world leaders. And then finally, we're making sure that all of this is built around a deliberate plan to ensure that the quantum future is diverse and inclusive and just, because we have this unique opportunity where we can see around the corner. We can see a quantum industry being formed today, and we can make choices today to ensure that that is accessible to folks across the educational spectrum, across socioeconomic segments, and that they can be part of the quantum workforce. And NCWIT is the most important partner in that piece of what we're doing. The other kind of flagship investment that's supporting all of this is what we call the Quantum Commons. And it's a 70-acre site that was given to the quantum industry by the state of Colorado that will house, not only laboratories and fabrication spaces, but hopefully become a center of gravity for companies to come and locate here, for workforce development and training to happen here, and for scaled cryogenic facilities and other scaled infrastructure investments that will make this the best place in the world to build quantum systems. So I'm going to spend the last few minutes before we go into questions talking about my company a little bit, what we do, and how that matters from a vision of workforce development in quantum. So we've talked a lot about qubits, and I mentioned at the beginning that you need good qubits in order to do any of these exciting things that we want to do with quantum computers. The reason it's hard to make a good qubit is qubits are incredibly sensitive to noise, to interference. So transistors, if you take a transistor and you change its value from 0 to 1, and then you put that transistor on a shelf and you walk away for 1 trillion years, then statistically, when you come back, you can expect that transistor to still be in the state you left it in. They are that reliable, that dependable. We are really good at making transistors. A quantum bit, on the other hand, a qubit, if you set its probability to some known value, 60% chance of becoming a 1 and a 40% chance of becoming a 0, and you turn your back, a millisecond later, that qubit will have decohered. The information will have been lost to the noise of the universe, and you can no longer use it for calculations, literally 1 millisecond. Now, that sounds incredibly fast. The good news is we can actually do a lot in a millisecond, so it's not the end of the world. But in order to even get that millisecond of coherence, you need to quiet down the noise of the universe to the point that you can manipulate that qubit directly. And generally, that means you're cooling the system down to nearly absolute zero. So the warmest of the systems on this page are operating at about the temperature of deep space. The coldest systems on this page, and that's the vast majority of systems out there, are operating a few hundred times colder than deep space. And so if you Google a picture of a quantum computer today, you'll generally see these beautiful looking golden chandelier things. People think the chandelier is the computer. It's not. The chandelier is the refrigerator. And the computer is a little tiny piece of silicon that isn't very interesting to look at and lives inside the silver piece at the bottom of the golden chandelier. The whole point of the chandelier is to get the noise of the universe to quiet down enough that you can create, maintain, and manipulate these extraordinarily fragile quantum states. And people love taking pictures next to the chandelier part of the system. What they usually don't do is close up the chandelier and take pictures next to the whole tangle of tubes and wires that make up that system, because the chandelier is just one component in what for most systems is about a 600 square foot footprint that, on the right-hand side here, the chandelier lives inside this blue trash can looking thing, and there's no quantum computer in this picture. Everything you see here, including the stuff in the background, it is just the auxiliary equipment that it takes in order to cool down that chandelier. And that tech, up until Maybell came around, really hadn't changed much in the last 50 years. So, if you were to colorize this picture on the left, you would end up with a white dude in glasses staring at a golden chandelier. And for better or for worse, that's the mascot of our industry. That's what quantum looks like very often today. And changing that is essential for a lot of reasons, not only on the infrastructure side, but on the who's doing the work side. And we are seeing that start to change in exciting ways. So from the infrastructure side, Maybell has taken these 600 square foot tangles of tubes and wires and turned them into modular deployable systems, two standard 19-inch racks that you can roll through a door, plug into a wall, turn on, and they just work. And basically anywhere that you can deploy a water-cooled server, you can deploy a quantum computer today, thanks to Maybell's innovations. It's been enormously transformative to the industry and created a pretty exciting company here at Maybell, where we went from an idea 4 years ago to about 70 people in 4 countries, mostly here in the Mountain West. Or in Colorado, really. We've got 7 locations in Colorado because we've grown more quickly than intended. We're hoping to consolidate at some point soon, but right now we're kind of spread around the Front Range. And we are building and shipping these systems all over the world right now. But, and this is the important piece to hit on for this group, the folks we're hiring are not physicists or mathematicians. It's now actually well over 80%, almost 90%, as we've scaled up our production org, of my employees don't have advanced degrees and didn't study physics. These are technicians, machinists, welders, folks who are making a good salary building the physical stuff of quantum, and those are just my direct employees. If you look more broadly at what it takes to make one of these golden chandeliers, my supplier ecosystem around me is almost entirely welders, fabricators, pipe fitters, machinists, folks who take big pieces of metal, turn them into small pieces of metal, and then join them together in very precise ways. And it looks a lot more like building an airplane or building an engine than it looks like, fabricating a GPU. And that is incredibly exciting in terms of the opportunities to bring people in to the quantum industry and have them grow and scale. I have employees who came in with no college and we're now trying to and are now getting undergraduate degrees while working at Maybell, and we're figuring out plans to give them a path to a PhD while working at Maybell. That's an exciting path. But I also have employees who came in with no college, don't want to go to college, and are kicking butt at Maybell building these world-class systems. And it is an incredibly exciting piece of the technology landscape to engage with, because no matter what your background is, there is a space for you in quantum right now. And that opportunity is only going to grow as the industry thrives over the next while. So landing the kind of core messages of today, and then we'll open this up for a broader conversation. Quantum is a technology that's going to define the next 100 years. It is happening in the Mountain West more than anywhere else, but it's happening everywhere. And being a part of that is incredibly exciting. We understand that leadership today, both locally and nationally, doesn't mean we're going to stay on top, but with smart investments and thoughtful development of the workforce to build this, we can keep the US on top. And so that's the core message that I wanted to share. And I'd really love to answer questions and engage with the group here for the next half hour or so.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Hovey. I'm a research scientist with NCWIT, and I will be moderating the Q&A. So if you would, please put your questions into the chat, and we will pose them. To get us started, Corbin, my question for you is, what type of specific strategies are being used to recruit this workforce into your pipeline?
Yeah, it entirely depends on which piece of the workforce we're talking about, right? A huge number of the employees I have on the production floor are coming from referrals from folks who got in early, right? And it's allowed us to cast a very wide net in terms of the backgrounds that people are coming from. We have an employee who at this point is one of my most exciting and trusted team members, who the only thing he ever studied was a relatively brief program on being an auto mechanic, right? And now he's leading a large team building $1 million cryogenic systems, right? And that we wouldn't have found him, I don't think, except a friend of a friend had gotten hired here before who came from the aerospace side and referred him in, right? And there are, with Elevate Quantum, we're working to set up pipelines directly into Maybell from some of the community colleges and things like that. There are already those for the optics side of the quantum industry. So broadly, quantum has two big categories, what we call AMO, which is atomic, molecular, and optical physics, and then solid state physics. And the fridges are mostly on the solid state side, but a lot of Colorado's expertise is on the optical side. And so we have programs like the OTE program at Front Range Community College that as soon as somebody signs up for that program, they have job offers from quantum companies here in Colorado who want them to join their company. But yeah, Maybell, everything we have gets posted on LinkedIn and a few other job boards, but I would say more than half of employees have come from referrals. And it's led to an interesting thing, like a large plurality of our techs come from the kind of music scene. They were working at kind of high-end audio equipment companies before. And so we have a whole special program where folks can go on tour with their bands and like take a leave of absence, maintain benefits while they're gone, and then come back and keep kicking butt here. And it means I get invited to much cooler concerts than I would ever have gone to on my own. So yeah, it's really cool.
That's amazing. Ermi, thank you for a great presentation. And then the question is, what will be the prerequisite courses to take for Quantum 101? What could you just suggest to a computer science associate degree student?
It depends a lot on what you want to do in quantum. So if you look at, the School of Mines, for example, has this master's in quantum engineering, and they have two distinct tracks in there, one of which is a hardware track, and one of them is the algorithms, applications, and software track. And other than the basics of quantum, which generally you need to have some math for, maybe, up through differential equations or linear algebra. Other than that, those two tracks are very different from what I understand, right? If you want to be a quantum physicist, you have to do a lot more math than candidly I've ever done, right? And that's great. We need those folks. They matter a lot to turning these systems from research systems into systems that are going to cure cancer and then infectious disease and turn the clock back on climate change. All of these things that we're really excited about quantum doing, those will come in part because of the folks who can do the hard math of quantum and can understand Schrodinger's equation and can, can invent new algorithms that allow for exponential speed up on problems beyond, uh, cracking encryption and molecular modeling, right? That's a huge space of opportunity. But again, there's an awful lot of opportunity to do stuff in quantum with a mechanical engineering degree, with a electrical engineering degree, or with no degree whatsoever, and just a attention to detail and an ability to learn in a cutting edge industry. And I think that's one of the challenges, but also most exciting opportunities in workforce development in quantum is if you pick an on-ramp to this industry and serve it well, then you can be teaching technicians how to deal with high vacuum systems and how to maintain a quantum appropriate level of cleanliness. And all of those folks will get hired. And you can be teaching people how to run Shor's algorithm and manage the Schrodinger equation, and all of those people will get hired. And those two groups of people are very different groups, but they're both equally essential, not only to Maybell, but to IBM, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Intel, all of the quantum startups. They are essential skill sets that are served by very different pipelines into the industry.
The vast majority of people on this call are higher education educators and administrators. What type of durable skill sets are you looking for as an employer?
Curiosity and attention to detail. If somebody is intellectually curious, they want to learn the next thing and solve the next problem, and then they can reliably execute in systems that have very little margin for error, that's going to be a great and successful employee here. It is important to realize, when we turn on one of our dilution refrigerators, the bottom space there becomes the coldest place in the known universe. Again, it's hundreds of times colder than outer space. You are just a few thousandths of a degree from absolute zero. Literally the coldest that physics will even allow you to theoretically get. We're a few thousandths of a degree away from that, right? That means there's no margin for messing up as you build this thing, right? And it requires everybody on the team to be thoughtful and careful, right? And folks don't necessarily need a PhD to be thoughtful and careful. We hired a very impressive scientist from NIST, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology here in Boulder. And he was spending maybe 70% of his time soldering wires together. And these are tricky wires. They're made of niobium titanium, which is a superconductor, and it really doesn't like to stick to solder, and it's hard to solder them, right? And in his first handful of months here, I asked him repeatedly, do you think we can have somebody else spend their time soldering those wires? Because I'd rather have you working on kind of the next gen systems. And he explained to me repeatedly that soldering these wires is really hard, and he didn't think it was a good idea to bring somebody in to do it because they wouldn't do a good job and it would take too long. And actually, this was the first hire from the high-end audio company that I mentioned. She came in and her degree was in some form of music. I forget whether it was a voice specific degree, but not a relevant degree to building quantum computers, certainly. But she'd been working at this high-end audio equipment store for a long time. She didn't know how to solder niobium titanium coming in, but she knew how to make really nice solder joints. And within about 2 or 3 weeks, she was soldering stuff a whole lot better than this, 20+ year research scientist, right? And we ended up hiring 3 or 4 more people, an awful lot like her, many from that same company. And it meant that my research scientist went from spending 70% of his time soldering wires to spending 0% of his time soldering wires and 100% of his time doing research. And we were getting better, more reliable joints. And we had 4 people making a fair amount more money than they were making at their last job and being core to this quantum industry. And now, I guess 3 of those 4 are still with us. We've hired more also, but they're doing all sorts of different things across the company now, right? And from this little seed of being able to just solder small things, good attention to detail and careful, a careful ability to execute. We've now built a whole team, and the first hire in particular is leading a full team doing pretty complex research on some next gen wiring because she's been with us for 3 years and become an expert on impedance matching and how to do these really unusual joins that are necessary for high density wires. It's exciting. So again, at the higher ed level, thoughtful preparation in terms of math and understanding quantum can lead you on a path that gets you into either the engineering or algorithms and application side. But there are lots of opportunities across the entire educational life cycle that somebody could go through to become part of the quantum industry.
That dovetails perfectly into the next question, which is from a computational standpoint, are there projects or activities that faculty could use in their computer science classes to get students exposed to and interested in quantum?
Yeah, so there are ways to get free access to quantum computers online, real live quantum computers for limited runs that I think, my first exposure to a quantum computer was through the IBM Quantum Experience, and I was able to, with very limited coding background, do a basic Hello World type operation on this quantum computer. That was pretty cool. And these are not, they don't give you enough time on the system for free to, develop the next algorithm or publish a paper, but they do give you enough time to understand how different this is from classical coding approaches, right? So there are relatively few high-level languages that exist in quantum, and those that do exist are still being refined significantly, right? And you can get very easily into what I guess is a reasonable approximation of machine language in quantum, where you are designing logic gates directly. We call it writing sheet music because the way that these gates are written, you have operations on the qubits that really do end up looking a little bit like sheet music. And so IBM's materials around this are excellent if you want a kind of traditional approach to learning about quantum. I think they're super powerful, super effective, strongly recommend them. Quantinuum has a kind of orthogonal approach that they call, oh gosh, what do they call it? I forget. I will look it up real quickly. But they basically have a mathless way to begin to understand quantum logic gates that is also pretty interesting. And my 9-year-old likes it, right? And I think it is an exciting alternative path that makes it clear that you can begin programming in quantum without necessarily understanding what's going on under the hood. And let's be clear, most everyone who is programming doesn't understand what's going on under the hood in the gates of a classical computer either, right? Most of us don't really know how complementary metal oxide semiconductor works. But we're walking around with 15 billion of them in our pocket. And for everybody on the phone here, most of you know how to program them relatively well, right? And that can be true with quantum as well. although because we're in the earliest days of quantum, some familiarity with the lower level elements of what goes into a quantum logic gate can be pretty useful.
Excellent. So someone posed a question that you'd mentioned the difference between traditional computing and quantum as being the difference between fire and nuclear. And you mentioned that there are some risks associated with quantum. Can you can you expound upon that?
Yeah, I mean, so there are not that many things today that we are 100% positive that quantum computers are much, much better at than classical computers. We know that there is a quadratic speed up on a whole bunch of problems, but given how hard it is to make a quantum computer, a quadratic speed up probably doesn't justify the huge amount of investment. However, for a handful of problems, we know that there's exponential speed up. And the biggest example that folks like to pull out for that is factoring large prime numbers, which is really bad news for any secret that we want to keep on the internet, because RSA is based entirely on the complexity of factoring large prime numbers. We know for a fact that a quantum computer of sufficient scale will crack RSA easily. We know that that will happen at some point in the not too distant future. Not too distant is probably 10, 15, 20 years, but it's coming. The good news is we've updated encryption protocols before, right? So there's absolutely a path to moving to quantum safe algorithms, and a quantum computer big enough to factor Shor's algorithm, which is the algorithm used to factor prime numbers efficiently in a quantum computer. It's probably being big enough to like cure cancer for several years by the time it is unlocking, every text message, every banking transaction, every email that's been written with current encryption protocols. Now, the flip side of that is anything that is secret today that we want to keep secret for the next 20 years, that's a very vulnerable database right now. Because if somebody steals that and just keeps it, as a harvest now, decrypt later attack, where they get access to an encrypted database, and folks have not historically been super careful about making it hard to access encrypted databases because they're encrypted and it's hard to break that encryption. But if somebody gets access to that encrypted database today, and 10 years from now has a quantum computer capable of factoring Shor's, that data is no longer secret, right? That is a big risk. Beyond that, the same computer that can be used to allow you to spit in a tube and produce medicine that has no side effects can be used to produce poisons that have no clear markers, right? And we really are moving towards a world where our ability to manipulate the fundamentals of nature, the things that make all of us, we're going to be enormously more able to control those things than we ever have before. And so ensuring that our approach to building this industry is deliberate and ethical is essential, because we are tapping into capabilities that we don't fully understand right now.
And I'm just going to throw in real fast too. There are some interesting solutions to the encryption about using properties of quantum, like entanglement, where you'd have two different machines that have quantum entanglement that talk to only each other. And if they get tampered with, you can tell. So there's some really interesting developments, and hopefully people on this call will get involved and help. The final question I would like to ask you is about broadening participation. What strategies is Elevate Quantum using to try to increase the number of women and the number of people from historically marginalized groups?
So the entire include pillar of the Elevate Quantum program is dedicated to that mission and ensuring that there are opportunities, mentors, training programs, and information that brings people into this industry early in the development of this industry. It's exciting to be in an industry where an investment of a few tens of millions of dollars can actually have a credible path to shift the direction of the industry, right? We aren't such a big industry that is a drop in the bucket. No, that's a meaningful portion of everything being invested into quantum workforce development, and it is being focused deliberately and aggressively on ensuring that folks from underrepresented communities in traditional STEM and technology programs are equally or overrepresented in the foundation of the quantum industry.
And thank you so much. I think with that, we will pause and take a 10-minute break and come back for the rest of the Higher Education Alliance meeting. But Corbin, thank you again. And as somebody who works on the Elevate Quantum team myself, you did a fantastic job. I'm sure Lucy would agree as well. So thank you all, and we will see you all back here on the hour at 1 o'clock.
Fantastic. Thank you all for having me. Bye.
Okay, hi everyone. Hopefully we're all settled in and back for another second half of our Alliance meeting. We are going to go ahead and get started. Our goal for today is really to, like I said, share the kinds of information that we would have shared in our meeting at the summit with you, give you a chance to see what our team has been up to, remind you that we do exist and we're here to support you in all the wonderful ways that you're doing BPC work at your institutions. So with that, I'll hand it off to Sherry.
Hi, everybody. I am Sherry Sanders, and I am the Director of Higher Education, and welcome to our Higher Ed Alliance Virtual Summit. It's great to be here with you today. You may notice that I'm off camera. I seem to, the last 2 Mays, have 2 eye surgeries, and such is the case again this year. And I see double. So it's a little disconcerting to be on camera. I'd love to see 2 of all of you, but it is a tad challenging. So hope you allow me some grace to be off camera. We hope you enjoyed Corbin's talk on quantum computing, and NCWIT is truly thrilled to be a partner in this initiative that's really leading this work in our country. And we're especially excited to be focused on what we can do to have a diverse and inclusive quantum workforce, both now and in the future. And for those of you who joined us at yesterday's virtual summit, we hope that you were inspired by our speakers as much as we were. And I think, after listening to Billy Allman's talk and giving it some thought, I can confirm that I'm a muscle. And a muscle believes that more opportunities exist together than when we are apart. Of course, we wish we were in San Diego. I'm a little curious about the sea and salt ice cream that Sarah, you mentioned in the very beginning. We so wish we were with you in person, but we really value the time that we have together here, particularly at the end of the semester or some point in a quarter system, wherever you are. We all know these last few months have been challenging, and we all feel a significant sense of loss. And many times we feel like we're operating under times of uncertainty. But there's one thing that I can assure you is that NCWIT and your higher ed team is more committed to broadening participation in computing than ever before. Our spirit of community and resolve to engage with change leaders across higher ed is steadfast. And being with you today, I think, further strengthens our resolve to both convene, equip, and let's not forget, unite our community around our collective mission. So let's look at what we're going to do today. So, you've already gotten your welcome. We hope to excite you with news about our award recipients, talk a little bit about our upcoming webinars on slate for the summer, and our continued and new programs that are on the horizon. And we'll also have some time at the end just to join together for some conversation. And before I turn it over to Jamie, I'd really like to say thank you to our higher ed social scientist. I did my math yesterday and I calculated that this is my 40th year in higher education. And I've worked with a number of amazing people over my career, both at UT Austin and here at CU Boulder. But this is the most inspiring group of people that I've ever gotten to work with. So I wanted to really take a moment to highlight them. And I really want to thank them for their creativity, oh my goodness, their flexibility, and their commitment to our Higher Ed Alliance, and particularly broadening participation in computing. So thank you, team. It's truly an honor to work with you, and you inspire me every day. And I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, who's going to kick us off in, I think, talking about our award recipients. But welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Sherry. My name is Jamie Huber Ward, and I'm Associate Director of Higher Ed at NCWIT. And I just want to say, Sherry, that we as a team are fortunate enough to work with you and your leadership, and it is an honor to be on this team. So before we get into awards, I'm just going to start by sharing a few foundations of the work that the higher ed team does. We offer higher ed research-based strategies and resources to broaden participation in computing through building community with our Higher Ed Alliance members, with those like-minded colleagues and peers, educating on promising practices, and equipping with tools to support data-driven decisions that facilitate systemic change. And we're going to continue talking about the ways in which we're currently doing that, and hoping to provide ongoing and just-in-time support for all of you as we go through this meeting update. But one of the ways in which we build community, in addition to meetings like this, our Meeting of the Mind sessions and other engagement opportunities, is historically recognizing the work that is occurring in the broadening participation space for computing in higher ed. And that's with our NCWIT Higher Ed Awards. This year, NCWIT is thrilled to name Dr. Judy Goldsmith, professor in the Department of Computer Science at the University of Kentucky, as the recipient of the 2025 Harold and Notkin Research and Graduate Mentoring Award. This award is sponsored by the NCWIT Board of Directors, and it recognizes faculty members who have combined outstanding research accomplishments with their own work, as well as excellence in graduate student mentoring. They advocate for equity in computing fields at both their local and national levels, and it's awarded in memory of the work done by Mary Jean Harold and David Notkin to honor their outstanding research, graduate mentoring, and overall efforts to broaden participation in computing. And I am going to go ahead and pop in the chat here the link to the announcement of Judy's award, so you can read more about the outstanding work that she has done in this space. I'm also going to move on and recognize Dr. Maureen Biggers as the recipient of the 2025 Joanne McGrath Cahoon Service Award. And this award is sponsored by AT&T. It honors distinguished educators and staff who have effectively challenged and changed the systems that shape the experiences of undergraduates and post-secondary computing programs. Award recipients demonstrate exceptional commitment to and success in creating long-lasting systemic change that improves the environment for all students. And this award is given in memory of Dr. Joanne McGrath Cahoon to honor her outstanding research and advocacy work to broaden and enrich participation in computing. And similarly, I am just going to pop the link to that announcement in the chat so you can all read about Maureen's wonderful contributions to the field. And we're so honored to have both of them as our award recipients this year. We would like to congratulate them If this were a traditional in-person summit, we would have an award presentation ceremony. Since we're unfortunately unable to do that at this point in time, we do hope to have a virtual award celebration in the future to recognize them in depth and just celebrate all of their lifelong achievements. And I believe at this point, I am going to turn it back over to Sarah Yu.
That's right. So arguably, of the three building blocks that Jamie talked about, building community is probably our most fun one. It refers to things like the awards and getting together at Summit. But also arguably, educating on promising practices is maybe the bread and butter of what NC-WIT should be when you think about why NC-WIT and what should be top of mind. It's educating on promising practices, knowing that you can turn to NC-WIT for reliable research-based strategies and tactics to broaden participation in computing. But we also recognize that that is hopefully a lifelong process, right? Or a career-long process. And while you may consider yourself a BPC expert, or maybe you are trying to get a junior faculty exposed to BPC principles, we hope that our resources can serve you regardless of where you are in that journey. So with that in mind, one of the things that we wanted to highlight on that front is our Meeting of the Minds webinars. So this is something that we try to offer on more or less a quarterly basis. And you can see that we have a wide range of topics that we like to bring to you in this hour-long webinar format. I think Corbin's talk just now is a perfect example of what you can expect from some of those offerings. We try to divide these offerings into 3 different categories. So Corbin's would be an example of a content-specific Meeting of the Minds webinar. We also look to highlight the work of our peer organizations, and I'll talk in just a minute about an upcoming session with Access Computing. And we also like to talk about the social science research that backs the BPC work that we promote. So giving you a chance to get exposed to sort of this multifaceted approach when you're thinking about BPC work. And with that in mind, we do have not only 1, but 2 upcoming sessions this summer. It's going to be a busy June for us. If you'd like to take a moment now and scan the QR codes that are on your screen, feel free to do that so you can go ahead and get registered for these sessions. Rest assured, I will be sending you many emails in the weeks to come, encouraging you to join us. So if you can't scan the QR code just yet, don't worry, you'll have the information in your inbox very soon. So our first session coming up is on Friday, June 13th from 1 to 2 p.m. Mountain Time, featuring our partners at Access Computing. So Dr. Brianna Blazer, Director and Co-PI of Access Computing, and several of her colleagues will be joining us for a panel on accessibility in the classroom, and really making sure that I think it's perfect timing as you're thinking about the start of the fall semester and how you might tailor the year ahead to hear from Access Computing about some best practices and principles that they recommend. We also have a Building the Pipeline webinar featuring Professor Nancy Banowski from the County College of Morris, and that'll be on Friday, June 26th at noon Mountain Time. And so the Building the Pipeline webinar is part of our brand of Meeting of the Minds webinar series, but specifically targeted to community college partners. The session that Professor Banowski is going to be presenting is going to be on building strong faculty-student relationships. And she's going to be talking about this specifically in the context of 2-year colleges, but as you might imagine, a lot of the principles of building strong faculty-student relationships transcend a 2-year context and into the 4-year context. So we hope that you'll take the time to join us on what will hopefully be a quiet Friday afternoon in June for you, and you'll have nothing else to do. So we hope you'll join us then for what's sure to be a fruitful afternoon. So I'll leave that up for just one more second. I think we'll also, we'll drop it in the chat so you can have the registration links that way. So definitely be sure to join us for both of those. So in addition to educating on promising practices, the Meeting of the Minds webinars is just one example. We have so many topic-specific resources available at ncwit.org/resources. And we've got a screenshot of just a few of our most recently updated resources here. If Chris and I were lucky enough to see you in Pittsburgh just a couple months ago, you would have gotten the hard copy of these resources from us. But these are just a few, like I said, of the whole library of resources that we hope to offer you. And also keep in mind that one of what I consider to be sort of the crown jewel in the resources portfolio is the NCWIT scorecard. I know that it's something that I often used to cite long before my NCWIT time, and when I was writing papers about BPC in my time in grad school, this was always something that I looked to for fast facts. And you'll see that we've expanded the scorecard. So for those of you who have been using this as I have as sort of a go-to resource over the years, you'll see now that the scorecard includes not only the traditional CIP 11 code that has sort of that more narrow definition of computer science and computing, but we've also aggregated 71 different CIP codes that reflect computing expertise to be able to toggle back and forth to give you both a narrow view of that computer science degree attainment trends, but also broadly, what does it look like in terms of overall participation in computing? And that list of 71 CIP codes is one that we actually came together with several partner organizations. So that's not just Chris and I sitting around one day and thinking, what do we think should be on the list? It's actually a process that predated my time at NCWIT. I know it was quite an effort. So for those of you on the call who were actually involved in that effort to help us identify those 71 CIP codes, thank you for your work and expertise there. And you'll see that reflected in our scorecard now. And then also just to remind you that we're also out in the world. So in addition to bringing you direct research-based strategies, we're also reporting on what works in a more academic sense as well. My colleague Kirsten Ferguson and I had the opportunity to do a qualitative study with our experiences with our Learning Circles participants and presented a paper on that earlier this academic year. And Jamie Huber-Ward also presented at Connected just a few months ago. So thank you for those of you who support this work in those ways as well. And of course, sort of the bottom building block that you saw on that slide are equipping with tools for making systemic change in your departments and in your organizations. This is the one that I get most excited about. It's where I think we get to have the most fun with you and also spend the most time with you. This is certainly referring to our most time-intensive practices in terms of thinking about how you're actually affecting change within your departments. So all of that change is rooted in our NCWIT system models. And you'll see on this slide here that we have a system model that's specific to the different facets of higher ed that you may be more rooted in. So our undergraduate program system model obviously focuses on the 4-year undergraduate program. The graduate program is more thinking about doctoral students. And finally, the academic workplace, recognizing that as much as we focus on students and the pieces that need to come together to make their experience fruitful and to get them from entry into a timely graduation, the academic workplace is also crucial to enhance BPC and to really make sure that we have inclusive departments that support everyone in the best ways possible. So I am going to spend the next 6 hours now talking about the different focus areas of our undergraduate system model because I could truly spend that much time talking about it. But for the interest of time, and since I did promise to let you go at the end of the hour, I will fight the urge to do that. But do keep in mind that that's not just a glib turn of phrase. We do actually spend 6 hours talking about these 6 focus areas and more over the course of our year-long NCWIT Learning Circles program. So this is something that you have likely heard over your time as NCWITers, the phrase learning circles. And so I do want to draw your attention to the fact that the most current iteration of learning circles has changed from what you may have known in years past, and it takes more of a train the trainer model now. So in the fall semester, we use a cohort model and bring together different peer institutions that are identifying similar issues within their departments that they're hoping to move the needle on, and have them do a series of virtual meetings with us. We not only talk about the system model that I just showed you, but also principles of organizational change and really think about how to build a strong team to be able to then go into the spring semester where they will complete a series of assessments on each of those 6 focus areas, use the reports from those focus area assessments to then facilitate conversations with their change team about where they feel they can have the greatest impact. and use those findings to then craft a strategic plan that they will hope to implement over the next 2 to 5 years. So our most recent iteration of Learning Circles was in the 23-24 academic year, and we had 34 fantastic institutions participate with us. And we are pleased to announce that we are going to be returning to that Learning Circles this fall. So for those of you who might be interested in joining us, we do still have a few spaces left for the 25-26 academic year. So please be in touch if that sounds like something you would like to be a part of. I do also want to draw your attention to the NCWIT tracking tool, which is sort of part and parcel with the Learning Circles experience. We ask that all of our Learning Circle participants submit data to us so that they can have their program entry and their student outcome data visualized to be a complement to the data that's generated from the assessments that they'll take in the TIJ. But remember that the tracking tool is also open to all NCWIT members. So to the extent that you are in a department or in a place in your data journey where you feel like you could use the support of NCWIT data visualizations, please be in touch with our team and we can walk you through that submission process so you can then receive data visualizations in 5 different categories. So we look at the applications that your program has received. Of those applications, how many were accepted, and of those, how many actually matriculated. And then on the student outcome side, so that's program entry, and then on student outcomes, we have enrollment and degree attainment data visualizations available for you. And you're welcome to submit as much or as little data as you have. We typically ask for about 4 years worth to be able to map any patterns and trends. But among those categories that I listed, if there are some that you would find harder to have access to, I know that program entry data can sometimes be challenging depending on where and how you're situated within the institution. So feel free to send us what you've got and we'll be happy to turn that into some business for you. So then I'll turn it over to Jamie. I talked about the 4-year version of Learning Circles, but we've got an exciting 2-year pilot coming, and I'll have Jamie share with you about that.
Hello again, everyone. As Sarah, you alluded to, a lot of the historical foundations for NCWIT's work was based on 4-year institutions, and we know that there's sometimes a gap in adaptation and translation for community colleges and other 2-year institutions in that space. So we've been working really hard over the past several years to try and do a needs assessment and an investigation into our resources so we can revise and adapt resources or create new resources to specifically meet the needs of our community college and 2-year institution members. We're in the midst of some of that work right now, and that work will lay the foundation for our community college or 2-year institution learning circles that we plan to launch in January or February of 2026. So we'll be taking a small number of community colleges to pilot those resources out in the learning circles format, and we'll hopefully be able to expand on that in the future. So if you are a community college or 2-year institution member and are interested in participating, there is a QR code or interest form bit.ly link right here that you can take a picture of or connect to and let us know that you're interested in potentially participating in those learning circles as well. And I am going to now move on to discuss some of our academic workplace work, which is also an area that we've heard from many of you that you've been interested in getting resources on, and that's historically been a gap in the NCWIT higher ed space. So we're really excited to be doing some work in this area. So we're looking at developing some new materials and tools, including a tech inclusion journey for the academic workplace prototype to help guide in broadening participation among faculty and staff and create inclusive workplace cultures and equitable workplace cultures in the computer science and tech academic departments. There's also a potential perhaps to do learning circles in this space in the future. I will say this work had been funded by a NSF Advanced grant, which we no longer have, but I myself, and I know NCWIT as an organization, is committed to finding funding to continue developing this work. So in a little bit more of an unconventional ask, if you think your department might be interested in participating in an academic workplace learning circle in the future, I'm just going to ask you to consider contacting us afterward or just putting a message in the chat. Because as I explore future funding options, I might be reaching out to interested folks for letters of collaboration or letters of support in those proposals. So let us know you're excited about it. And with that, I believe I am going to transition over to Chris to talk about the graduate student space.
Hi, everyone. Again, thank you so much for coming to this presentation. So I am leading a doctoral programs version of the systemic model. We have piloted this with 2 universities in the past, but we'd like to transform this into a learning circle module. So if you are interested, by all means, please sign up using this QR code or the link that's at the bottom or in the chat to help co-develop this program and help shape what it looks like. We have a lot of really interesting resources that are evidence-based about what we can do in graduate and doctoral programs in particular to increase participation. But this really is kind of a new and exciting opportunity. So we, as is the NCWIT way, would love your collaboration and helping to create this to be the best that it can be. With that, I will hand that back over.
All righty. So as you can imagine, we've talked a lot about learning circles, which are a very time-intensive, year-long process. And as we were reflecting on the nature of BPC work, our team realized in this latest go-round of thinking about where our work and the directions we were going with it could go, that a Catalyst series might be something of use. So what we envision for this Catalyst series is essentially a more compact version of our year-long Learning Circles program, and giving specific audiences within the BPC ecosystem the tools and the language they need to be supportive of this work. So we're thinking in particular to start with deans and department chairs. So thinking about leadership roles and how they can be educated about the needs of BPC work, why this work matters, and how they can be supportive of it. Some other populations that we have in mind include TAs, research faculty. So as you can imagine, these are specific populations, specific targeted learning series to be able to give them the tools they need, again, to affect that systemic change that we're all here in support of. And then the most exciting thing that's coming soon to a laptop screen near you is our Higher Ed Alliance Engagement Portal. So this is something that's going to be brand new to all NCWITers. So no matter how long you've been a part of our alliance, this is something that is brand new, and we're very excited about it. This is something that we hope to roll out by the fall semester, and it's going to be your home for all things NCWIT. It's going to be a place where you can have a bird's eye view of not only your own engagement with NCWIT opportunities, but also to be able to keep better track of how your institution is engaging with NCWIT. So be able to see how your colleagues have engaged and how you can perhaps leverage different learnings from different colleagues to have an even stronger impact within your department. So the screenshot that you see here is the landing page of the portal, and you can see the 4 building blocks of the key ways that you would engage with this portal down at the bottom here. So you can build your engagement plan, have a view of what that plan looks like. You'll also be able to see, this is a great place for you to have sort of that one-stop shop when you're looking for all those NCWIT resources that I mentioned earlier. The portal is going to be a place where you can go directly and find curated resources specific to the higher ed space. And view our upcoming events. And these are just a couple more things that you can hope to see in the portal this fall. So on the left, you can see sort of the menu of engagement opportunities that we have. I know that feedback that we sometimes get from folks is, I've either been really engaged with NCWIT in the past, but I don't know what I can do now, or I'm new to NCWIT and I'm not quite sure how to get started. So with sort of both of those ends of the spectrum in mind, we've created this menu of engagement opportunities that you can then use to build your own engagement plan for yourself personally. And then, as I mentioned, on the right-hand side, you can see a screenshot of where you can see an overview of what all of your colleagues within your institution have been engaged with as well. So if you, for example, didn't get a chance to attend the NCWIT Summit, as Melissa Cameron did in the screenshot, you can maybe reach out to her and say, hey, Melissa, I didn't get a chance to go. What were some of your key takeaways? Let's chat about it. Our hope is that this is going to help streamline your engagement with NCWIT resources, help you find what you need more quickly and easily, but also give you a better picture of your overall engagement to help support the work that you're doing. So like I said, we're hoping to roll this out to you in the fall semester. All NCWIT members will automatically be sort of in our database, have the ability to access this portal. If there are others within your institution, you'll just let us know and we'll get them added for access. But we hope this will be a new tool in your toolkit to be able to better engage with NCWIT. And of course, as always, we're open to feedback. So as you start clicking around and get in there, feel free to share your experiences with us so we can continue to make it better and better serve your needs. So with that, I think that's all of the exciting news and updates and programs that we wanted to share with you. And we wanted to spend the last of this time going into some discussions. So given the size of the meeting today, I think it would be great if folks could actually just come, if to the extent that you feel comfortable on camera, and maybe just join us in a informal conversation about some of these topics. For those who don't feel comfortable sharing, we do have a Google Doc where we were going to take notes about this. So if you would prefer to anonymously add your thoughts to that document, you're welcome to do that as well. But I think that's something that we were just curious to hear about and curious to see how you would want to talk through this with your colleagues. So just thinking about, what's top of mind among your colleagues within your computing departments right now. And um, with the assumption that we might guess what's top of mind right now, what strategies and tactics have you found to be effective in really responding to this ever-changing landscape? So with that, I would just love to hear from y'all. What's going on? And of course, how can NCWIT be a part of that conversation?